Sometimes the most ordinary Tuesday can become the most extraordinary memory of a lifetime. For Catherine Williams, a quiet third-year student at Castle Hill Academy, this particular morning would begin like any other, rushing to catch the 8:15 bus, clutching her worn leather satchel, and hoping her unruly auburn hair would somehow cooperate with the autumn wind. But what she couldn't possibly know was that by sunset her name would be whispered in every corridor, her photograph would grace the Academy's main bulletin board, and her life would be forever changed by a simple act of kindness that would ripple through the prestigious halls of one of England's most distinguished schools. The story you're about to read isn't about fairy tales or impossible dreams. It's about a real young woman whose genuine warmth and unconscious grace caught the attention of someone very special, someone whose presence at Castle Hill Academy that day was meant to be a closely guarded secret. This is the true account of how an ordinary student became extraordinary, not through ambition or calculation, but through the simple power of being authentically herself. Catherine Williams pressed her face against the cool glass of the Academy's tall Gothic windows, watching the October rain create intricate patterns on the ancient stonework outside. Castle Hill Academy had stood for over 3 centuries, its weathered brick walls and towering spires a testament to generations of learning and tradition. The morning light filtered through the gray clouds, casting long shadows across the courtyard where students hurried between classes, their navy blazers dark against the autumn palette. She pulled her cardigan tight around her shoulders and glanced at the ornate clock above the library entrance. 20 minutes until her next class, and she still hadn't finished reviewing her notes for Professor Morrison's challenging literature seminar. Catherine had always been the type of student who prepared meticulously, not because she was naturally brilliant, but because hard work was the only way she could keep pace with her more privileged classmates.
Castle Hill Academy wasn't just any school.
It was where the children of diplomats, business leaders, and yes, even minor royalty came to receive their education. Catherine's presence there was thanks to a scholarship she'd earned through countless hours of study, and her mother's unwavering belief that education could open doors that social status never could. Every morning when she walked through those imposing iron gates, she felt both grateful and slightly out of place, like a wildflower growing in a manicured garden. The corridor around her buzzed with the usual pre-class chatter. But today something felt different. There was an undercurrent of excitement, hushed conversations that stopped abruptly when teachers passed by, and an unusual number of staff members moving purposefully through the halls. Catherine noticed how Mrs. Henderson, the normally unflappable headmistress, kept checking her watch and smoothing her already perfect gray hair. "Catherine, there you are." Emily Thornton's voice cut through her observations. Emily was Catherine's closest friend at the Academy, though their backgrounds couldn't have been more different. Where Catherine had earned her way in, Emily's family had been sending children to Castle Hill for 4 generations. Yet somehow, their friendship worked beautifully, built on shared laughs, late-night study sessions, and Emily's remarkable ability to see past social boundaries. "You look like you've seen a ghost," Emily continued, settling beside Catherine on the worn velvet bench beneath the window. "What's wrong?" "Nothing's wrong exactly," Catherine replied, tucking a strand of her auburn hair behind her ear. "It's just that everyone seems so on edge today." "Have you noticed?" Emily's eyes sparkled with mischief, the way they always did when she knew something others didn't. "Oh, that. Well, I suppose there's no harm in telling you now, since you'll find out soon enough anyway. We're having a very special visitor today." "What kind of special visitor?" Catherine asked, though part of her already suspected the answer. Castle Hill Academy was known for its distinguished guests, former prime ministers, celebrated authors, successful alumni who returned to inspire the next generation. But the level of preparation she'd observed suggested someone even more significant. The kind that requires security checks and protocol briefings, Emily said carefully. "Let's just say that today's assembly isn't going to be the usual announcement about uniform regulations and cafeteria schedules." Before Catherine could ask more questions, the first bell chimed, its deep resonant tone echoing through the corridors. Students began moving toward their classrooms with the practiced efficiency that came from years of routine. Catherine gathered her books, her mind still puzzling over the mystery, and made her way to Professor Morrison's classroom on the 2nd floor. The literature seminar was small, only 12 students, which made it both more intimate and more intimidating. Professor Morrison had a reputation for asking probing questions that could catch even the best-prepared student off guard. Today, however, he seemed as distracted as everyone else. He kept glancing toward the window that overlooked the main entrance, and Catherine could swear she saw him checking his phone more than once during his lecture on Victorian poetry. "Miss Williams," Professor Morrison's voice suddenly focused on her, What do you make of Tennyson's use of imagery in The Lady of Shalott? I think Tennyson uses the mirror as a metaphor for how we often experience life secondhand, through reflections and stories rather than direct engagement. The Lady of Shalott is trapped not just physically in her tower, but emotionally and spiritually, experiencing the world only through what she can see in her mirror. Interesting interpretation, Professor Morrison nodded approvingly. And what happens when she chooses to look directly at the world? She dies, Catherine answered quietly. But perhaps that's Tennyson's point. Sometimes we have to risk everything to truly live, even if it means facing consequences we can't foresee. Professor Morrison's eyebrows rose slightly. Well said. That's exactly the kind of thinking that will serve you well both academically and in life. As the class ended and students filed out, Catherine felt a small glow of satisfaction. These moments of recognition, when her hard work paid off in front of her peers, made all the early mornings and late nights worthwhile. She was packing her notes when she heard commotion in the hallway outside. "They're here, I can see the cars," someone whispered urgently. Catherine joined the small crowd of students pressing against the corridor windows. Below, in the circular drive, 3 black vehicles had pulled up to the main entrance. She could see men in dark suits speaking into small devices, and Mrs. Henderson standing at the top of the stone steps with several other faculty members. "Who is it?" someone asked. "I heard it might be a cabinet minister," another student suggested. But Emily, who had appeared beside Catherine, shook her head with that knowing smile. "Much more interesting than a politician," she murmured. The first person to emerge from the lead vehicle was clearly security, his alert posture and careful survey of the surroundings unmistakable. Then came a woman Catherine didn't recognize, elegantly dressed and carrying herself with quiet authority. But it was the third figure that made Catherine's breath catch. Even from the second-floor window there was something unmistakable about the way this person moved, the subtle deference of those around them, the careful choreography of their arrival. Catherine couldn't see clearly enough to make out features, but she could sense the significance of this moment rippling through the crowd of students around her. "We should head to the Great Hall," Emily suggested quietly. "The assembly is starting soon, and something tells me we won't want to be late for this one." The Great Hall at Castle Hill Academy was a masterpiece of Gothic architecture, with soaring ceilings supported by carved stone arches and tall windows that cast colorful light through their stained glass panels. On normal days, it hosted everything from daily announcements to formal dinners. Today, it felt charged with anticipation as students filed into the wooden pews that faced the elevated platform at the front. Catherine found herself seated in the middle section, close enough to see clearly, but far enough back to avoid unwanted attention. The faculty sat in their traditional places along the side walls, but she noticed several people she didn't recognize occupying seats usually reserved for board members. Everyone seemed to be holding their breath. Mrs. Henderson approached the podium with unusual ceremony. Her typically stern expression softened by what Catherine could only describe as barely contained excitement. "Students and faculty of Castle Hill Academy," she began, her voice carrying clearly through the hall. "Today we have the extraordinary honor of welcoming a very special guest to our community." She paused, and Catherine could feel the collective lean forward of 300 students. "It is my great pleasure to introduce someone who embodies the values we strive to instill in all our students: dedication to service, commitment to learning, and the understanding that true nobility comes not from birth, but from character and actions." Catherine's heart began to beat faster. The formal language, the careful preparation, the security presence, it all pointed to one possibility that seemed almost too extraordinary to believe. "Please join me in welcoming Her Royal Highness Catherine, Princess of Wales." The silence that followed lasted perhaps 3 seconds, but it felt like an eternity. Then the Great Hall erupted in respectful but enthusiastic applause, as a figure in an elegant navy coat rose from a seat Catherine hadn't even noticed, mounted the steps to the platform, and turned to face the assembly. Catherine Williams found herself staring at Catherine, Princess of Wales, and in that moment she felt something shift in her understanding of what was possible in the world. The princess was smaller than she appeared in photographs, more approachable somehow, with a warm smile that seemed to encompass the entire room. But it was her eyes that struck Catherine most. Intelligent, kind, and genuinely interested in the faces looking back at her. "Thank you so much for that warm welcome," the princess began, her voice clear and confident but not at all pretentious. "I have to admit I've been looking forward to this visit for weeks. Castle Hill Academy has such a remarkable reputation for academic excellence and community spirit, and I was eager to see that reputation in action." As the princess continued speaking about education, opportunity, and the importance of young people in shaping the future, Catherine found herself hanging on every word, not because of the speaker's title, but because of the genuine passion and intelligence behind her remarks. This wasn't a ceremonial appearance by someone going through the motions. This was someone who genuinely cared about what she was saying. I understand that many of you are working incredibly hard to make the most of the opportunities you've been given here, the princess continued. Some of you are here because of academic scholarships, others because of family tradition, and still others because of particular talents or interests that brought you to Castle Hill's attention. But regardless of how you arrived here, you all share something important. You are here to learn, to grow, and to prepare yourselves to make a positive difference in the world. Catherine felt those words settle into her heart like seeds. She had sometimes felt apologetic about her scholarship status, as if she needed to prove she belonged among students from more privileged backgrounds. But hearing the princess acknowledge different paths to the same goal made her feel proud of her hard work rather than defensive about her circumstances. The formal presentation concluded with enthusiastic applause, but Catherine could sense that something more was about to happen. Mrs. Henderson returned to the podium with an announcement that made her heart skip a beat. Her Royal Highness has graciously agreed to meet with a small group of students for an informal discussion about education and future aspirations. If you're interested in participating, please remain in your seats while others are dismissed. The princess will be selecting participants personally. Catherine felt Emily's elbow nudge her ribs. Stay, Emily whispered urgently. You have to stay. About half the students filed out, chattering excitedly about what they'd just witnessed. Those who remained sat quietly, trying to appear worthy of selection while simultaneously attempting to look casual about the whole thing. Catherine found herself caught between hope and practical realism. What were the chances that a scholarship student from a working-class family would be chosen for such an honor? The princess had stepped down from the platform and was moving through the remaining students with easy grace, stopping to chat briefly with various groups. Catherine watched her interact with each student, noting how she seemed genuinely interested in their responses, how she laughed at their nervous jokes, how she put them at ease with her natural warmth. When the princess reached Catherine's row, Emily immediately straightened and offered a perfect curtsy. Your Royal Highness, I'm Emily Thornton. It's an honor to meet you. Thank you, Emily, the princess replied with a smile. Have you enjoyed your time at Castle Hill? Very much, Your Royal Highness. It's been particularly meaningful because I've made such wonderful friends here. Emily glanced meaningfully at Catherine, people I might never have met otherwise. The princess followed Emily's gaze to Catherine, who felt her cheeks warm under the scrutiny. She managed what she hoped was an appropriate curtsy, though her knees felt distinctly unsteady. Your Royal Highness. And you are? The princess asked gently. Catherine Williams, Your Royal Highness. The coincidence of their shared name felt almost surreal. Catherine, the princess repeated thoughtfully. What a lovely coincidence. Tell me, Catherine, what's your favorite subject here at the Academy? The question was so normal, so conversational, that Catherine felt some of her nervousness dissipate. Literature, Your Royal Highness. I love how stories can help us understand different perspectives and experiences. That's wonderful. Are you working on anything particularly interesting at the moment?
We've been studying Victorian poetry, particularly Tennyson.
I find his work fascinating because it deals so much with the tension between safety and authentic living. Catherine surprised herself by speaking so naturally, but something about the princess's manner encouraged honesty over formality. The princess's eyes brightened with genuine interest. That's a rather sophisticated observation. Do you have a favorite Tennyson poem?
The Lady of Shalott, Catherine answered without hesitation.
I know it's quite popular, but I think there's something profound about her choice to look directly at life even knowing the consequences. Indeed there is, the princess agreed. Sometimes the most important decisions we make are about whether we'll engage fully with the world or merely observe it from a safe distance. There was something in her tone that suggested she understood that dilemma on a deeply personal level, and Catherine felt a moment of connection that transcended their vastly different circumstances. Here was someone who, despite her privileged position, understood the courage required to step fully into life. I'd very much like to continue this conversation, the princess said warmly. Would you be interested in joining our discussion group? Catherine could barely believe what she was hearing.
Yes, Your Royal Highness.
I would be honored. As the princess moved on to speak with other students, Emily grabbed Catherine's arm excitedly. Do you realize what just happened? She chose you. Out of everyone here, she chose you for the discussion group. Catherine was still processing the encounter, replaying every word and gesture in her mind. She had expected to feel intimidated meeting a member of the royal family, but instead she felt inspired. The princess had treated her not as a subject to be acknowledged politely, but as a person worth knowing. That simple recognition meant more than all the academic achievements she'd accumulated since arriving at Castle Hill. The selected group of 12 students was ushered to the Academy's elegant morning room, a more intimate space with comfortable seating arranged in a circle. Portraits of distinguished alumni gazed down from the walls, and tall windows provided natural light that made everything feel warm and welcoming. The princess settled into her chair as if she were simply another participant in the discussion, her posture relaxed and open. "I thought we might talk about your aspirations," she began, "both immediate and long-term. What are you hoping to accomplish during your time here at Castle Hill, and where do you see yourselves in 10 years? It was exactly the kind of question that might have felt overwhelming in another context, but somehow the princess's manner made it feel like a conversation among friends. Students began sharing their dreams: medical school, international relations, environmental science, the arts. Each response was met with thoughtful questions and genuine encouragement. When the conversation reached Catherine, she felt that familiar flutter of nerves. "I'm hoping to study English literature at university," she began, "and eventually I'd like to teach. I think education is one of the most powerful tools we have for creating positive change." "What kind of positive change are you hoping to create?" the princess asked. Catherine took a breath, choosing her words carefully. "I think everyone deserves access to the transformative power of learning, regardless of their background. I was fortunate enough to receive a scholarship to Castle Hill, and it's opened up possibilities I never could have imagined. I'd like to help create those opportunities for other students who might not otherwise have access to them." The princess leaned forward slightly, her attention focused entirely on Catherine. "That's a beautiful aspiration. Have you thought about what specific steps you might take to achieve that goal?" "I've been volunteering as a tutor for younger students here at the Academy," Catherine explained, gaining confidence as she spoke. "And I've been working with a local primary school in the village, helping children with their reading. It's shown me how much individual attention can matter, especially for students who might be struggling or who don't have much support at home. That's exactly the kind of hands-on experience that will serve you well," the princess said approvingly. "It's one thing to have good intentions and quite another to put those intentions into practice." As the discussion continued, Catherine found herself not just participating but truly engaging with ideas about service, leadership, and responsibility. The princess had a remarkable ability to draw out thoughtful responses from each student, creating an atmosphere where everyone felt their contributions were valued. The conversation lasted nearly an hour, covering topics from climate change to social media's impact on young people to the importance of mental health awareness. Throughout it all, the princess demonstrated not just intelligence and compassion, but a genuine curiosity about their perspectives as young people coming of age in a rapidly changing world. As the session drew to a close, the princess addressed the group as a whole. "Thank you all for such a thoughtful and inspiring discussion. It's clear that Castle Hill Academy is preparing remarkable young leaders for the future. I hope you'll remember that true leadership isn't about titles or positions. It's about the daily choice to use whatever gifts and opportunities you've been given in service of something larger than yourselves." She paused, her gaze moving around the circle and settling briefly on each face. "I have no doubt that each of you will find your own way to make a meaningful difference in the world." As students began to file out, thanking the princess and saying their goodbyes, Catherine found herself among the last to leave. She was gathering her courage to express her gratitude when the princess approached her directly. "Catherine," she said warmly, "I wanted to tell you how impressed I was by your thoughtfulness today. Your passion for education and your commitment to service remind me of many wonderful teachers I've encountered over the years." "Thank you so much, Your Royal Highness," Catherine managed to say. "This has been truly extraordinary. I hope you'll keep in touch with how your studies progress," the princess continued, reaching into her purse and withdrawing an elegant card. "Please don't hesitate to reach out if there's ever any way I might support your educational goals." Catherine accepted the card with hands that trembled slightly. It was heavy paper with an embossed coat of arms, and beneath it in elegant script was a personal note. "For Catherine Williams, may your journey in education be filled with joy and purpose."
With admiration, Catherine. Standing there in the morning room at Castle Hill Academy, holding a personal note from the Princess of Wales, Catherine Williams felt the entire trajectory of her life shift.
Not because of royal recognition or prestigious connections, but because someone she deeply admired had seen something worthwhile in her dreams and had chosen to encourage them. As she walked back through the Gothic corridors toward her next class, the card safely tucked in her blazer pocket, Catherine realized that this day would become a touchstone for her, proof that kindness and excellence could exist at the highest levels, and that her own aspirations to serve others through education were not just worthy but necessary. The rain had stopped while they were in the morning room, and autumn sunlight was streaming through the tall windows, casting golden rectangles on the ancient stone floors. Catherine smiled to herself, thinking of Tennyson's Lady of Shalott choosing to look directly at life despite the risks. Today, she had done the same thing. She had engaged fully with an extraordinary opportunity, and instead of consequences, she had found confirmation and encouragement. Whatever challenges lay ahead in her academic journey, whatever obstacles she might face in pursuing her dreams of teaching and service, she would carry this moment with her as proof that authenticity and genuine passion were recognized and valued even in the most unexpected circumstances. The weeks following the princess's visit to Castle Hill Academy passed in a blur of academic intensity and quiet reflection. Catherine found herself returning again and again to that golden afternoon in the morning room, not just as a cherished memory, but as a source of strength when her coursework became overwhelming, or when she felt the familiar pang of not quite belonging among her more privileged peers. The elegant card from the princess had found a place of honor in Catherine's small desk drawer, nestled between her most important documents and letters from home. She hadn't written yet, unsure of the proper protocol, and deeply aware that someone of the princess's stature must receive thousands of letters from well-meaning admirers. What could a scholarship student from Castle Hill possibly have to say that would justify interrupting such an important person's schedule? But as November arrived with its characteristic English gloom, Catherine found herself facing exactly the kind of challenge that made her think of the princess's words about using one's gifts in service of something larger than oneself. The situation had started small, as significant things often do, with a conversation overheard in the Academy's library during her regular evening study session. "I just don't understand why they even bother coming here," came a voice from behind the tall stacks of literature texts. Catherine recognized the speaker as James Whitmore, a fourth-year student whose family connections to Castle Hill stretched back generations. Half of them can barely keep up academically, and they certainly don't add anything to the social fabric of the school. Catherine's cheeks burned as she realized James was talking about scholarship students. She remained frozen behind her study table, uncertain whether to confront him or simply leave quietly. "Come on, James," another voice interjected. Catherine thought it might be Marcus Chen, usually a voice of reason among the fourth-year students. "That's not fair. Some of the scholarship students are among our top performers. A few exceptions don't change the fundamental problem," James continued, his tone growing more confident. "These people don't understand our traditions. They can't participate in the social activities that build real connections, and frankly, they make everyone else uncomfortable with their obvious gratitude and eagerness to prove themselves worthy." Catherine felt her hands clench into fists. Every word felt like a personal attack, not just on her but on every student who had earned their place at Castle Hill through merit rather than inheritance. The rational part of her mind knew that James represented only a small minority of students, but his casual cruelty stung nonetheless. "I think you're wrong about that," came a third voice, and Catherine's heart lifted as she recognized Emily Thornton speaking with characteristic calm authority. "Some of my closest friends here are scholarship recipients, and they've enriched my experience at Castle Hill immeasurably. They bring perspectives and insights that, frankly, many of us born into privilege would never consider." "Emily, you're being naively idealistic," James replied dismissively. "These social experiments might make the administration feel progressive, but they don't serve the Academy's long-term interests. Castle Hill has always been about maintaining certain standards and traditions." Catherine could hear Emily's voice tightening with controlled anger. "If by standards you mean academic excellence, intellectual curiosity, and character, then I'd argue the scholarship students embody those values better than many legacy admissions." "That's enough." Marcus's voice cut in firmly. "James, you're out of line, and frankly, you sound like something from a previous century. The Academy's mission has always been about developing future leaders, not preserving some outdated class system." The argument continued for several more minutes, but Catherine had heard enough. She gathered her books as quietly as possible and slipped out of the library, her mind racing with conflicting emotions. Part of her was grateful for Emily and Marcus's defense of scholarship students, but another part was humiliated by the need for such a defense at all. Walking back to her dormitory through the lamplit paths of the Academy grounds, Catherine found herself thinking about the princess's comment regarding the courage required to engage fully with life rather than merely observing from a safe distance. For 3 years, she had largely chosen the observer's role, working diligently, staying out of controversies, and accepting her position as a grateful recipient of Castle Hill's generosity. But James Whitmore's casual bigotry had crystallized something important for her. Remaining silent in the face of prejudice wasn't just personally cowardly. It was a disservice to every future student who might benefit from the scholarship program she had been fortunate enough to access. The princess had spoken about using one's gifts in service of something larger than oneself, Perhaps it was time for Catherine to do exactly that. The next morning brought the monthly assembly where students could propose new clubs, activities, or initiatives for administrative consideration. Catherine had attended these assemblies faithfully but had never participated. Today, however, she found herself standing at the back of the great hall, heart pounding, with a proposal hastily written on a piece of notebook paper. Mrs. Henderson was calling for new business when Catherine raised her hand. The headmistress looked mildly surprised. Catherine Williams was known as an exemplary student, but not one given to public speaking, but nodded encouragingly. Yes, Miss Williams. Catherine made her way to the podium, acutely aware of hundreds of eyes following her movement. She had addressed crowds before during academic competitions and presentations, but this felt different. This felt personal and important in a way that made her hands shake slightly as she unfolded her paper. Good morning, she began, surprised by how steady her voice sounded. I'd like to propose the formation of a new organization, the Castle Hill Academic Mentorship Program. She paused, scanning the sea of faces in front of her. Emily was beaming at her from the third row, while James Whitmore looked distinctly annoyed from his position near the back. The program would pair current Castle Hill students with incoming scholarship recipients to provide academic support, social guidance, and general mentorship during their transition to life at the academy. Many students arrive here with exceptional academic ability, but without familiarity with Castle Hill's unique culture and expectations. That means, Catherine felt her confidence growing as she continued. This isn't about charity or sympathy. It's about maximizing the potential of every student who walks through our doors. When students succeed academically and socially, it raises the standard for everyone. When they struggle unnecessarily due to cultural barriers rather than academic limitations, we all lose the benefit of their contributions. She could see several faculty members nodding approvingly, and a number of students were leaning forward with interest. The program would be entirely voluntary, both for mentors and mentees. Mentors would commit to meeting with their assigned student at least once per week during their first term, providing guidance on everything from academic expectations to social navigation. In return, mentors would gain leadership experience and the opportunity to develop meaningful relationships with peers they might not otherwise encounter. Mrs. Henderson was taking notes, which Catherine interpreted as an encouraging sign. She pressed on with growing confidence. I'd like to volunteer to coordinate the program's development and implementation. I believe my experience as a scholarship recipient gives me insight into the specific challenges such students face, while my academic success here demonstrates that these challenges can be overcome with appropriate support. Henderson. I'd be happy to submit a more detailed proposal for administrative review, including program structure, goals, and assessment methods. The applause that followed was enthusiastic and sustained. Catherine could see students throughout the hall nodding and whispering approvingly to their neighbors. More importantly, she could see several faculty members looking impressed by her initiative and articulation.
Mrs.
Henderson approached the podium with a warm smile. Thank you, Miss Williams, for that thoughtful and well-presented proposal. I'd very much like to see your detailed plan, and I suspect several of our faculty members would be interested in discussing this initiative further. Please schedule a meeting with my office at your earliest convenience. As Catherine made her way back to her seat, she felt a profound shift in her relationship with Castle Hill Academy. For 3 years, she had been a grateful recipient of the institution's resources. Today, she had become an active contributor to its mission. The difference felt transformative. The response to her proposal was more immediate and overwhelming than she had anticipated. Before the assembly had even concluded, students were approaching her with questions and offers to volunteer as mentors. Emily, predictably, was among the first. Catherine, that was brilliant, she exclaimed as they walked toward their first class.
I had no idea you were thinking about something like this.
Neither did I until yesterday,
Catherine admitted. But I realize that I've been letting other people define what it means to be a scholarship student here, rather than taking ownership of that experience.
Over the following days, Catherine found herself in the unusual position of being sought out by classmates who had previously been friendly but distant. Students she had always admired for their confidence and social ease were suddenly interested in her opinions and eager to participate in her proposed program. The meeting with Mrs. Henderson exceeded Catherine's most optimistic expectations. The headmistress had clearly given considerable thought to the proposal, and came prepared with detailed questions about implementation, funding, and administrative oversight. Why did the D-Nature system add? Third, Miss Williams, she began, settling behind her imposing oak desk with Catherine's typed proposal in front of her. I must say that your initiative addresses something our faculty has been discussing for some time. We've been aware that our scholarship students sometimes face social and cultural adjustments that their academic preparation doesn't necessarily address. Catherine nodded. I think most scholarship students adapt eventually, but often at the cost of considerable stress and sometimes academic performance during that adjustment period. And your proposed solution is both practical and scalable. Mrs. Henderson leaned forward with obvious interest. Tell me about your vision for selecting and training mentors. Catherine had anticipated this question and had spent hours developing her response. I think the most effective mentors would be students who are naturally empathetic and socially skilled, but also academically successful. They don't need to be scholarship recipients themselves, but they should understand and respect the value that diversity of background brings to our community. How would you handle potential conflicts or personality mismatches? I'd recommend a trial period of 4 weeks, with the option for either mentor or mentee to request a change without explanation or stigma. The goal is to create supportive relationships, not forced friendships. Mrs. Henderson made additional notes on the proposal. I'd like to present this to the faculty council next week with the possibility of implementing a pilot program for the spring term. Would you be prepared to coordinate that timeline? Catherine felt her heart racing. Yes, absolutely. There would be additional responsibilities beyond the initial proposal. You'd need to work with our admissions office to identify incoming scholarship recipients, coordinate with current students interested in mentoring, and develop assessment tools to measure the program's effectiveness. Henderson was describing was larger than anything Catherine had ever undertaken, but she felt ready for the challenge. I'd welcome the opportunity to develop those components. That evening, Catherine sat at her desk with her laptop open and the princess's card beside her keyboard. The past few days had been transformative, but they had also crystallized her sense of purpose in a way that felt directly connected to their conversation in the morning room. The princess had spoken about using one's gifts in service of something larger than oneself, and Catherine finally felt she understood what that meant in practical terms. She began typing carefully, conscious that every word would be scrutinized, not just for content but for appropriateness of tone and protocol. Your Royal Highness, she began, then paused. The formal address felt strange after the warmth of their personal interaction, but she knew it was necessary. I hope this letter finds you well. I am writing to update you on an initiative that grew directly from our conversation during your visit to Castle Hill Academy last month. Your comments about service and leadership have continued to resonate with me, particularly your observation about using one's opportunities in service of something larger than oneself. I have recently proposed the creation of an academic mentorship program at Castle Hill, designed to support incoming scholarship students as they adjust to life at the academy. The response from both students and faculty has been overwhelmingly positive, and we are planning to implement a pilot program in the spring term. The initiative has challenged me to move beyond simply being grateful for my own opportunities to actively working to expand such opportunities for others. Your encouragement during our discussion gave me the confidence to speak publicly about issues I had previously addressed only privately. I wanted to share this development with you because your visit marked such a significant moment in my understanding of what it means to engage fully with the world rather than merely observing from a safe distance. The metaphor we discussed about Tennyson's Lady of Shalott has become personally relevant in ways I couldn't have anticipated. Thank you again for the time you spent with us and for the inspiration your words provided. I hope the success of this program will demonstrate the ripple effects of your encouragement and serve as a small tribute to the values you embody. With deepest respect and gratitude, Catherine Williams. She read the letter several times, adjusting phrases and checking for any presumption or inappropriate familiarity. When she was satisfied with the tone and content, she printed it on the Academy's official stationery and addressed it according to the protocol information she had researched in the library. Sending the letter felt like completing a circle that had begun in the morning room during the princess's visit. Catherine had no expectation of a response. She understood that members of the royal family received countless letters and couldn't possibly answer them all personally. But she felt compelled to acknowledge how profoundly their interaction had influenced her subsequent actions. The faculty council's approval of the mentorship program came 2 weeks later, along with a budget allocation and official recognition as Academy initiative. Catherine found herself appointed as student coordinator, a position that came with both responsibility and recognition she had never sought but felt ready to embrace. The announcement generated considerable interest among current students, with over 40 volunteers applying to serve as mentors for the anticipated 15 incoming scholarship recipients in the spring term. The selection process required Catherine to develop criteria and conduct interviews, responsibilities that stretched her organizational and leadership skills in entirely new directions. James Whitmore, to her surprise, was among the applicants. Catherine struggled with her reaction to his interest, given their philosophical differences about the value of scholarship students. During his interview, she addressed the issue directly.
James, I have to ask why you're interested in this program, given some comments I've heard you make about scholarship students. James looked uncomfortable but met her gaze directly. I suppose I owe you an apology for those comments.
They were inappropriate and reflected poorly thought-out opinions rather than actual experience. Catherine waited for him to continue. Honestly, your presentation at Assembly made me realize that I've been holding on to attitudes that don't reflect the person I want to be. I'd like the opportunity to challenge my own assumptions by getting to know scholarship students as individuals rather than as representatives of some abstract policy debate. Catherine was skeptical but impressed by his directness. The program requires mentors to be genuinely supportive and encouraging. If your participation is primarily about personal growth rather than service to your mentee, it may not be the right fit. I understand that, James replied. But sometimes personal growth and service to others aren't mutually exclusive.
I think I could learn a lot by mentoring someone whose experience at Castle Hill has been different from mine, and I hope that genuine curiosity about different perspectives would benefit my mentee as well. After considerable reflection, Catherine decided to include James in the program, reasoning that his willingness to examine his own biases might make him a more effective mentor than someone who had never questioned their assumptions about privilege and access.
The winter term passed quickly as Catherine balanced her regular coursework with the extensive preparation required for launching the mentorship program. She worked closely with the admissions office to identify incoming students who might benefit from the program, developed training materials for mentors, and created assessment tools to measure the initiative's effectiveness. By February, everything was in place for the spring launch. Catherine had matched 15 incoming scholarship recipients with carefully selected mentors, scheduled training sessions, and established regular check-in procedures to ensure the program's success. The night before the program's official launch, Catherine sat in her dormitory room reviewing her notes and thinking about the journey that had brought her to this point. 6 months ago, she had been simply another hard-working scholarship student, grateful for her opportunities but largely invisible within the broader academy community. Tonight, she was recognized as a student leader, coordinator of an innovative program, and someone whose ideas were valued by faculty and peers alike. The transformation hadn't happened through seeking recognition or advancement for its own sake, but through responding authentically to a situation that demanded action. James Whitmore's prejudicial comments had challenged her to move beyond quiet competence to active leadership. The princess's encouragement had given her the confidence to believe her voice mattered. But ultimately, the change had come from within. From her decision to engage fully with her community rather than simply navigating it successfully. As she prepared for bed, Catherine caught sight of the princess's card in her desk drawer, now accompanied by folders of program materials, mentor applications, and correspondence with faculty members. The card had become a symbol not just of an extraordinary day, but of the possibility that one meaningful interaction could inspire sustained action toward positive change.
Tomorrow would mark the beginning of what Catherine hoped would be a lasting contribution to Castle Hill Academy. More importantly, it would represent her full engagement with the opportunities and responsibilities that came with being part of this remarkable community.
She had finally, fully chosen to look directly at life, and like Tennyson's Lady of Shalott, she was discovering that the view was worth whatever risks such engagement might entail. Spring arrived at Castle Hill Academy with unusual warmth, as if nature itself was celebrating the new beginnings that seemed to define Catherine's final term. The mentorship program had launched successfully 2 months earlier, and the early results exceeded even Catherine's most optimistic projections. The 15 scholarship recipients were not only adapting well academically but were also becoming active participants in academy life, joining clubs, participating in student government, and forming friendships that crossed traditional social boundaries. Catherine found herself in the curious position of being recognized as the architect of a genuine innovation in academy culture. Faculty members regularly consulted her on matters related to student integration and support services. Her peers, including many she had previously admired from afar, now sought her opinions on everything from academic policy to social events. Most surprising of all, several universities had reached out through the Academy's college counseling office, expressing interest in her leadership experience and innovative thinking. But it was a letter that arrived on a particularly beautiful Tuesday morning in April that would prove to be the culmination of everything that had begun with the princess's visit 6 months earlier. Catherine was checking her mail before breakfast when she noticed an envelope that was clearly different from the usual academic correspondence. The paper was heavy cream-colored and bore an embossed coat of arms that made her heart skip a beat. Her hands trembled slightly as she opened it, careful not to damage the elegant stationery. Inside, written in the same careful script she remembered from the card she treasured, was a personal note that would change the trajectory of her immediate future. "Dear Catherine," it read, "I was delighted to receive your letter updating me on the academic mentorship program you developed at Castle Hill Academy. The initiative you described sounds both innovative and impactful, embodying exactly the kind of thoughtful leadership our young people need to cultivate. I have been following the program's progress through my connections at Castle Hill, and I am deeply impressed by both the scope of your vision and the excellence of its implementation. The program's success in improving retention rates and social integration among scholarship recipients represents precisely the kind of positive change that emerges from combining good intentions with practical action. I am writing to invite you to participate in a special educational symposium I am hosting at Kensington Palace next month. The event will bring together 25 outstanding young leaders from across the United Kingdom who have demonstrated exceptional commitment to educational equity and innovation. You would join university students, recent graduates, and young professionals who share your passion for expanding access to quality education. The symposium will include presentations on educational policy, discussions about innovative programs like yours, and the opportunity to connect with others who are working towards similar goals. Perhaps most importantly, it will provide a forum for sharing your ideas with educational leaders, policymakers, and philanthropists who are positioned to support and scale successful initiatives. I do hope you will be able to attend. Please confirm your availability by responding to my private secretary, whose contact information is included below. All travel and accommodation expenses would of course be covered. I look forward to continuing our conversation about the transformative power of education and the importance of ensuring that opportunity is accessible to all young people regardless of their circumstances. With warmest regards and continued admiration for your excellent work, Catherine. A symposium with educational leaders from across the country, recognition of her work at the highest levels, the opportunity to discuss ideas and programs with people who could implement them on a national scale. She was still standing in the mailroom, letter in hand, when Emily found her 20 minutes later. "Catherine, there you are. I've been looking everywhere for." Emily stopped mid-sentence as she took in Catherine's expression. "What's wrong? You look like you've seen a ghost." Catherine wordlessly handed her the letter. Emily's eyes widened as she read, and by the time she finished, she was practically bouncing with excitement. "Catherine, this is incredible. The princess remembered you. She's been following your program, and now she wants you to speak at Kensington Palace." Emily paused, suddenly focusing more intently on Catherine's face. "Why don't you look happy about this?" It was a fair question, and one Catherine had been asking herself since opening the letter. The invitation was an extraordinary honor, representing recognition she had never dared to imagine. So why did she feel overwhelmed rather than elated? "I think I'm terrified," Catherine admitted quietly. "This is so much bigger than anything I've ever done. What if I don't belong in a room with university students and educational policy experts?
What if my little program at Castle Hill isn't actually as innovative as the princess thinks it is?"
Emily's expression softened with understanding. "Catherine, do you remember what you told me after the princess's visit?"
You said that authentic engagement with life requires risk, and that sometimes the most important decisions are about whether we'll participate fully or observe from a safe distance. Catherine smiled ruefully. "I hate it when my own words are used against me. Not against you, for you. This invitation exists because you chose to engage fully with Castle Hill, instead of just attending classes and keeping your head down. You identified a real problem, developed a solution, and implemented it successfully. The princess isn't inviting you to Kensington Palace out of charity. She's inviting you because you've proven yourself as someone with valuable insights about educational equity." Over the following days, news of Catherine's invitation spread throughout Castle Hill Academy, generating a level of excitement and pride that she found both gratifying and overwhelming. Henderson called her into the office to express the Academy's congratulations and to discuss how Catherine's participation in the symposium might benefit Castle Hill's reputation and programs.
"Miss Williams," the headmistress began with a warmth that Catherine had rarely seen from her. "I want you to know how proud we are of your achievement."
This invitation reflects not only on your excellent work, but on Castle Hill's commitment to developing students who contribute meaningfully to society. Thank you,
Mrs. P.
Henderson. I'm honored to represent the Academy. More than that, I hope this experience will continue to shape your thinking about educational leadership. Have you given any thought to how you might want to use this opportunity? Catherine had been thinking about little else. I'd like to learn about programs and initiatives beyond Castle Hill to understand how our mentorship model might be adapted for other contexts. And I hope to make connections with people who are working on similar problems at different scales. Excellent approach. I'd also like you to consider how your experience might inform our ongoing development of student support services. This symposium could provide valuable insights for Castle Hill's future programs. The weeks leading up to the symposium passed in a blur of preparation and anticipation. Catherine researched the other participants, studied educational policy reports, and refined her presentation about the mentorship program. She also found herself the recipient of advice and encouragement from unexpected quarters. James Whitmore, who had proven to be one of the most effective mentors in her program, approached her one afternoon as she was leaving the library. "Catherine, I wanted to thank you for giving me the chance to participate in the mentorship program, despite your reservations about my initial attitudes." James rarely spoke about personal matters, preferring to keep interactions focused on practical program details. "Working with David has been one of the most rewarding experiences I've had at Castle Hill," he continued. David was James's mentee, a scholarship recipient from Liverpool whose academic brilliance was matched by his passion for environmental science. "He's challenged me to think differently about privilege, opportunity, and responsibility. I'm glad the pairing has worked well for both of you," Catherine replied genuinely. "I wanted to tell you that because I think you should know that your program has changed more than just the scholarship students' experience here. It's changed some of the rest of us too. And that's going to matter as we go out into the world after Castle Hill." The comment stayed with Catherine as she made her final preparations for the London trip. She had conceived the mentorship program primarily as a support system for incoming scholarship recipients, but James's observation highlighted something she hadn't fully considered: the program's impact on mentors and the broader academy culture. The initiative had created connections and conversations that transcended traditional social boundaries, fostering the kind of community engagement that strengthened institutions. The train journey to London felt simultaneously endless and too short. Catherine spent the time reviewing her notes and trying to calm her nerves. But as the familiar skyline came into view, she felt her anxiety transform into excitement. This was the opportunity of a lifetime, and she was determined to make the most of it. Kensington Palace was more beautiful than she had imagined, its elegant facades and manicured gardens providing a stunning backdrop for serious discussions about educational policy and social equity. Catherine arrived with the other symposium participants, a diverse group that included university students from Oxford and Cambridge, recent graduates working in education policy, young teachers implementing innovative programs, and social entrepreneurs developing educational technology. The opening reception was held in the palace's orangery, a magnificent glass-walled space that seemed to capture and amplify the spring sunlight. Catherine felt underdressed despite her careful attention to appropriate attire, but her nervousness dissipated as she began conversations with other participants and realized they shared her passion for educational equity and her uncertainty about whether they truly belonged in such elegant surroundings. "First time at the palace?" asked a young woman with a slight Scottish accent, introducing herself as Sarah MacLeod from the University of Edinburgh. "I keep expecting someone to tell me there's been a mistake and I should leave immediately." Catherine laughed, feeling instantly more comfortable. "I'm having exactly the same feeling. I'm Catherine Williams from Castle Hill Academy." "Oh, you're the one with the mentorship program. I read about it in the briefing materials." "That's brilliant work. Exactly the kind of practical solution we need more of." As the reception continued, Catherine found herself in conversations with participants whose work ranged from developing educational apps for underserved communities to researching the impact of student debt on career choices. Each conversation reinforced her sense that the problems she had identified at Castle Hill were part of much larger issues affecting educational equity throughout the United Kingdom. The formal program began the following morning in the palace's state apartments, rooms that had hosted centuries of important discussions and decisions. The princess opened the symposium with remarks that set both the tone and the ambitious goals for their 2 days together. "I've invited you here because each of you represents the kind of innovative thinking and practical action that our educational system desperately needs," she began, looking around the room with the same warmth and genuine engagement Catherine remembered from Castle Hill. "You come from different backgrounds, different institutions, and different perspectives, but you share a commitment to ensuring that educational opportunity is accessible to all young people." She paused, her gaze settling briefly on Catherine with a smile of recognition. "Over the next 2 days, I hope you'll challenge each other's thinking, share your successes and failures, and begin building the networks and relationships that will sustain your work long after you leave this palace." The first session focused on successful local programs, and Catherine was among 5 participants selected to present their initiatives. Standing in a room where portraits of monarchs gazed down from gilded frames, speaking to an audience of accomplished young leaders and senior educational officials, she felt the full weight of how far she had traveled from that October afternoon when she overheard James Whitmore's dismissive comments about scholarship students. Her presentation about the Castle Hill Mentorship Program was well received, generating thoughtful questions about implementation challenges, assessment methods, and potential for scaling to other institutions. But it was during the question period that Catherine experienced the most meaningful moment of the symposium. Miss Williams, came a question from a distinguished older gentleman she later learned was a senior civil servant in the Department for Education. Your program addresses social and cultural integration as much as academic support. Do you see this as a model that could be adapted for other types of educational transitions? Catherine considered the question carefully. I think the fundamental principle, pairing students who have successfully navigated a particular environment with those just beginning that navigation, could apply to many contexts. University transitions, career changes, even geographic relocations for educational purposes. What would you see as the essential elements that would need to be preserved across different contexts? Voluntary participation on both sides, careful matching based on compatibility rather than just convenience, clear expectations about the mentor's role, and regular assessment to ensure the relationships are beneficial for everyone involved. The princess leaned forward with obvious interest. Have you given thought to how such programs might be supported and coordinated at a national level? Catherine felt her heart rate increase. This was moving beyond her experience at Castle Hill toward discussions of policy and implementation she had never seriously considered. But the question demanded a thoughtful response.
I think the key would be maintaining local flexibility within national standards, she replied slowly, working through the ideas as she spoke. Each institution or community would need to adapt the model to their specific challenges and resources, but sharing best practices and assessment tools could help ensure quality and effectiveness. The discussion that followed was exactly what Catherine had hoped for from the symposium: serious consideration of practical solutions by people positioned to implement them. She left the session feeling energized rather than drained, eager to continue developing ideas that had taken shape through the conversation. The second day included workshops on educational policy, funding mechanisms, and program evaluation. Catherine found herself fully engaged with concepts and strategies that would have seemed impossibly complex just 2 years earlier. More importantly, she was contributing meaningfully to discussions with participants whose experience and credentials far exceeded her own. During a break between sessions, the princess approached her directly for the first time since the opening ceremony. Catherine, I wanted to tell you how impressive your contribution has been. Your insights about peer mentorship and institutional culture have added tremendous value to our discussions. Thank you, Your Royal Highness. This experience has exceeded all my expectations. I hope it's also given you some ideas about your future plans. Have you thought about how you might want to build on this work after you complete your studies at Castle Hill? It was a question Catherine had been avoiding, partly because the possibilities seemed overwhelming, and partly because she was reluctant to seem presumptuous about opportunities that might or might not exist.
I know I want to continue working in education, she replied carefully.
Whether that's through teaching, policy work, or program development, I'm not entirely certain yet. Would you be interested in exploring some of those options more systematically? I may be able to arrange some informal conversations with people who could help you understand different pathways. Catherine felt her breath catch. The princess was offering to facilitate connections that could shape her entire career trajectory. I would be deeply grateful for any guidance you could provide. Excellent. I'll have my private secretary arrange some meetings for you in the coming weeks. Consider it an extension of the mentorship principle you've championed. Sometimes we all benefit from guidance from those who have navigated paths we're just beginning to explore. The symposium concluded with a formal dinner in the palace's cupola room, an intimate space that encouraged continued conversation among participants. Catherine found herself seated next to Dr. Wesley, Margaret Chen, a senior lecturer in education policy at King's College London, who had been following the discussion of Catherine's program with obvious interest.
I've been thinking about your presentation yesterday, Dr.
Chen began over the first course. Would you be interested in co-authoring a research paper about peer mentorship programs in secondary education? I think there's significant potential for academic publication and policy impact. Catherine nearly dropped her fork. I would be honored, though I should mention that I have no experience with academic publishing. That's not a problem. I can guide you through the process.
What's important is that you have practical experience and insights that many academic researchers lack. The combination of practical knowledge and rigorous analysis often produces the most valuable scholarship. As the evening continued, Catherine found herself in conversations that opened doors she hadn't even known existed.
A graduate student from Oxford invited her to speak at a conference on educational innovation. A young civil servant suggested she apply for a summer internship in the Department for Education. Sarah McLeod proposed collaborating on a comparative study of mentorship programs at different types of institutions. By the time the symposium officially concluded the following afternoon, Catherine had exchanged contact information with virtually every participant and had accepted invitations to speak, research, and advise that would extend well beyond her remaining time at Castle Hill Academy. The princess's closing remarks captured what Catherine was feeling but couldn't quite articulate. What you've accomplished in these 2 days represents the best of what education can achieve. The synthesis of practical experience, rigorous thinking, and genuine commitment to service. You've challenged each other, learned from each other, and begun building relationships that will sustain your work for years to come. She paused, looking around the room with obvious satisfaction. More importantly, you've demonstrated that innovative solutions to complex problems emerge not from isolated brilliance but from collaborative engagement with communities and institutions. The programs and initiatives you've shared represent exactly the kind of thoughtful, practical idealism our educational system needs. On the train back to Castle Hill, Catherine reflected on the extraordinary 2 days she had just experienced. The symposium had expanded her understanding of educational issues far beyond the boundaries of her own institution, but it had also confirmed that the work she had begun at Castle Hill was both valuable and scalable. The mentorship program had emerged from her specific experience as a scholarship student, but the principles underlying it had broader application and significance. More personally, the symposium had crystallized her sense of vocation in a way that felt both exciting and slightly overwhelming. She was no longer simply a student planning for an uncertain future. She was someone with demonstrated expertise, established relationships, and clear opportunities to contribute to educational policy and practice at the highest levels.
As the familiar towers of Castle Hill Academy came into view, Catherine felt a deep sense of gratitude for the journey that had brought her to this point.
It had begun with a scholarship application written at her kitchen table, continued through 3 years of hard work and gradual confidence building, and reached a turning point with an unexpected conversation with a visiting princess who had seen potential she hadn't recognized in herself. But perhaps most importantly, it had been shaped by her decision to move beyond grateful recipient to active contributor, to risk engagement rather than settle for observation, and to trust that authentic passion for service would find its appropriate expression.
The mentorship program would continue at Castle Hill Academy, guided by the excellent staff and student volunteers Catherine had trained. The research collaboration with Dr.
Chen would provide academic validation for the practical work she had pioneered. The connections she had made at the symposium would create opportunities to extend her impact far beyond a single institution.
And through it all she would carry with her the lessons she had learned from both Tennyson's Lady of Shalott and from her own experience. That the most important choice any person faces is whether to engage fully with the world despite its risks and uncertainties, or to remain safely isolated from the possibility of both failure and meaningful contribution. Catherine Williams had chosen engagement, and in doing so had discovered that authentic service to others becomes ultimately the most rewarding form of service to oneself.
The princess had been right. True leadership wasn't about titles or positions, but about the daily choice to use whatever gifts and opportunities one possessed in service of something larger than personal success. As she walked through the familiar gates of Castle Hill Academy for one of the last times as a student, Catherine realized that her story there was ending, but her larger story of service and leadership was just beginning.
And that felt like exactly the kind of beginning worthy of all the preparation, challenge, and growth that had brought her to this moment of possibility and purpose.